has been said that each of our lives is a dance to a song we cannot hear. If that is true, we can infer that the music animating the lives of the Frohnmayer family, for whom this evening's dinner and award are named, of Hardy Myers, Ted Goodwin, and Lair Aschenbrenner, who have received the award, and of Clifford Freeman, whom we are honoring this evening, the music animating their lives must be righteous indeed. Good evening. I'm Richard Meeker, and I'll be your server tonight. Here is our menu. The appetizer will be provided by the president of the Law School's Alumni Association. There will then be a break while we eat some real food. During this time, you're encouraged to get up and visit with law school friends and acquaintances. Then, around the time dessert is served, you'll hear from a series of friends and colleagues of Judge Freeman, esteemed representatives of the University of Oregon, and from Judge Freeman himself. So let's begin. The Honorable Thomas Hart is a graduate of the University of Oregon School of Law, a Marion County Circuit Court judge, and head of the Law School's Alumni Association. Judge Hart, will you come up here and assume your role as our official host this evening?
Thank you, Richard, and thanks to everyone that has so much graced this room tonight. I am Tom Hart, and I am the president of the Law School Alumni Board of Directors. I'm the old fat guy from Salem, and Jess back there is putting this on video, and so I had to sneak over so he didn't catch me walking away from him because I have a spot I don't really want to be seen. And now I'm going to put my cheaters on because I can't read anymore either. But it is my distinct privilege to welcome all of you to tonight's event. It is the 5th Annual Frohnmayer Award for Public Service. This award is given to a graduate faculty member or friend whose public service brings honor to the school. It certainly is reflected in tonight's recipient and the other recipients that have come before us. I especially want to welcome Judge Clifford Freeman, and at his request, Christina Wu. Is Christina here? There's something special about a relationship that's 30 years old or more that was at the law library, and you came all the way from California to share this special evening. And Clifford has many dear friends that are here, but I think you've come the farthest as far as I can determine right at the moment. I also want to welcome our first recipient and the U of O president, Dave Frohnmayer, and his wife, Lynn. Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure to have Dean Margie Paris and her husband, Sheldon Rubin, here with us tonight. Thank you. Former recipient and Attorney General Hardy Myers, thank you very much for your attendance. And tonight's speakers, the Honorable Answer Haggerty, Julie Haggerty, Michael Schrunk, class of 67, the Multnomah County District Attorney, Joyce Benjamin, retired Associate Superintendent of Public Instruction, class 74. Did I get that right, Joyce? No, Superintendent of the Oregon Department of Education. Let me get that. Class of 60. And a special welcome and thanks to two people that are dear friends to the law school. One of them is tonight's MC, who's be serving up a little bit to you. That's Richard Meeker, the class of 74, and publisher for Willamette Week, who also, along with the Honorable Ellen Rosenblum, class of 75, are the nominators for tonight's award, and we thank them for their great nomination. The thanks that we have for tonight are to our sponsors for the evening's wine, Willamette Valley Vineyards, Jim Burnett, the founder and president of Willamette Valley Vineyards, was a former University of Oregon student body president, and John Mason, the tasting room manager. We've had a lot of wonderful commitment from the law firms in the community and individuals who help sponsor tables or bring you folks to this event. Adder Wynn and Valerie Fisher, class of 74, Black Helter Line. Black Helter Line and Brooke Burns, class of 2000. Davis Wright Tremaine, Dwayne Bosworth, class of 82. Dunn, Carney, Allen, Higgins, and Tongue, Ann Foster, class of 99, thank you. Garvey, Schubert, Barr, the lovely Cynthia Frazier, class of 87. The hit Hiller, Monfils, and Williams, and the class of 1996, Allison Kruger. Miller, Nash, and Peter Richter, class of 1971. Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt, and Kurt Hansen, class 1984. The folks at Tonkin Torp and John Stride, class of 1990. And a special individual thanks to Richard Alexander, class of 1969, who purchased the table for tonight's event. And what we thought might only be one table turned out to be two, the class of 76, who Alan Engstrom, who spearheaded all that. We have two tables over here. And another ne'er-do-well, Maureen McKnight, from dragging the folks here from the Multnomah County bench. Thank you very much. And the folks on the ground that actually spent a lot of time and effort over the last several months to try to bring this event to you, and I think have succeeded immensely, are the members of the Frohnmayer Award Committee, Dwayne Bosworth, Heather Decker, Valerie Fisher, Kurt Hansen, Chair Allison Kruger, Greth Larson, the Honorable Dave Schumann, and John Stride. Thank you very much from that committee. And even though I have lots of pages left, I'm really only got a couple more lines. I'd like to thank the folks at the law school that helped pull this together. Matt Roberts, the Associate Dean for External Relations, Colleen McKillop, our Special Events Coordinator, Sue Wilson, Jonathan Manton, and Alicia Augsburger. Thank you very much. And now here's the giveaways, folks, all the fun for the rest of the night. Those place card holders in front of you are yours to keep. Take them home with you, our wonderful gift to you. Some people call them roach clips, but I don't know that that's the case. Do not use them without a card. And if you haven't been talking, we're not done yet. Thank you. You're going to have to talk amongst yourself, because the person that has the next birthday after today, not the date, not the year, but the date, will be the lucky recipient of the centerpiece from your table. So find out whose birthday is next in line, and that centerpiece belongs to you. If you'll all remember that we're here tonight as a special night for the Honorable Cliff Freeman, I call him Cliff Freeman. I remember when he was on the Board of Visitors when I was in law school 20 years ago, and I thought he was a very experienced person and somebody worth really talking to, and I found his counsel good when I was president of the Student Bar Association, and I can't believe I'm celebrating 20 years being out of law school this year. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Enjoy yourselves.
The Frohnmayer Award is given annually to a friend, faculty member, or graduate of the University of Oregon School of Law whose public service brings honor to the school. So it's simply wonderful to be here this evening to be able to participate in a dinner honoring Clifford Freeman. Let me read to you a few sentences from one of the letters nominating Judge Freeman for this award. Clifford's a very quiet, soft-spoken person whose entire adult life has been one of engagement in public service rather than private gain. He's worked at the Public Defender's Office, served on the state's Board of Education, helped run the state purchasing office, been an excellent judge, served on the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, served on the state's Access to Justice Committee, has been the 11th District's representative on the American Bar Association's National Conference of State Trial Judges, served on the Governor's Task Force on Corrections Planning when Dean Kirkpatrick was chair, is a senior fellow of the American Leadership Forum, and so on. Clifford has also been active on the University of Oregon Law School's Alumni Board, but you'd never know any of this from talking to him, as he's one of the most modest people I've ever known. Now, Judge Freeman, you must know we are not going to allow your modesty to prevent others from singing your praises. We'll begin with U.S. District Court Judge Ansel Hagerty and his wife, Julie. When I asked Judge Hagerty how I might describe him to you this evening, he replied, matter-of-factly as only he can, introductions mean nothing to me. Judge Hagerty, you've always personified remarkable courage and heroism to me, and I could spend much of this evening singing your praises, but I'll grant your wish. Your wife, however, made no such suggestion. All of you should know that Julie Hagerty is a dynamo in her own right. In addition to a long career with Portland Public Schools, which culminated in her appointment as school principal, she has the rare distinction among us of having performed in a major motion picture. Perhaps most important, both Hagertys have known Judge Freeman forever. Ladies and gentlemen, Julie and Ansel Hagerty.
Well, I told Ansel, well, thank you. Your name is on here first, but he says, you can go first. I said, oh, okay. So here I go. I've known Clifford for about 24 years, and my husband has known him for a lot longer, but I always have considered Clifford a dear, dear friend, even from our very, very first meeting. And I can remember our first encounter because it was basically an interview. Ansel and I were dating. We hadn't dated very, very long, but several of his partners in his law firm checked me out to make sure I was okay. And then Clifford was at his godson's party, and Clifford was there to check me out to see if I was okay. And so I guess I'm okay. But Clifford is exceptional, and especially with his string of degrees, he has performed unanimous tasks in all three of those areas of economics, law, and education. And I'd like to speak for a minute about the education part. As an educator, we always like to tell our students to be lifelong learners, that once you get your education and you've gotten into the workforce, that you still have to keep learning and try to be the best that you can be and to give back. And Clifford is very exemplary in that area. Clifford has given back, and he continues to give back, as you heard just previously. During the course of the time that I've known Clifford, he's told me about Washington, D.C. and all of his events where he gets brochures and booklets, and so whenever he would return from a conference, he would make sure I would get a copy. Any of the latest research, I would get a copy. Then he'd come over and maybe he and Answer would talk about law, but I always got to talk about education with him, so it was really a wonderful occasion. He also served at the Northwest Regional Lab and was able to give you a lot of research data. I particularly like the fact that he could back up the information that he'd give you. He can give you all the statistics and all the background. Well, on another note, Clifford is also our youngest daughter's godfather. Well, not only is he her godfather, but he decided that he would take in all three. So on different occasions, he's taken our son off to the side and given him a few lectures. And especially when he thought that he was really grown up. And he always accepted Patricia, too, as his other godchild. So he's always considered all three of them, even though Felicia is really the godchild. And then I've asked my children over the years, well, what do you really like about Uncle Clifford? And what do you remember about him? And it's really interesting because for every occasion, for every holiday, for every birthday, Uncle Clifford has always recognized them. And he always gives them a book, and he always gives them something special and a treasure. But as they got older, he was very concerned about getting something that was appropriate for them. But Clifford, you must know that now they visit the arrangement probably every month. So that's a little shop that's in Northeast Portland. And Sue Motz has gotten to know my girls quite well because they visit there quite frequently because of Clifford. Last week, I had the pleasure of attending a play. It's a musical play called Crowns, and it was about wearing different kinds of hats. And while watching the play, I thought of Clifford, because not only in the community is he, you know, as a judge, he has certain tasks. As a lawyer, he has lots of tasks, but he also has supported the arts. This play about hats was talking about all the different hats we wear. And Clifford, you have worn so many and given so much to so many people. And we truly, every person in this room can tell a story about the treasures that you have given others. So I wanted to thank you for that. I can't tell you the numerous times that Clifford has given us tickets to go out on a date, or even decided that, you know, you guys need to see this. And so Answer will say, Jewel, we need to go and see this. I said, how did you hear about Clifford? So Clifford, thank you. He also got our family involved with the Interstate Firehouse Cultural Center, and for a while I was on their board. So he has truly supported the arts. If you ask him about jazz, you can ask him about the fine arts, you can ask him about plays. Clifford knows that. I, being an English major, really appreciated the fact that he also loves literature, quotations, and any book that he can get his hands on. I had a pile of books in the car in a bag that I decided I was going to bring, and I said, this is just way too much stuff to bring. But Clifford has given me books on parenting, on education. He's given us books on poetry, on inspiration, and women's rights. And yes. One thing that I don't want to forget to say is when Clifford would visit our family during the holidays, because usually about 9 o'clock at night, we'd say, who was that? And then we'd say, it must be Uncle Clifford. And it was. But we'd always say, well, how are you doing, Uncle Clifford? And he'd always respond with, better than I deserve. And we'd say, aw. But finally, I'd like to add that this is one of the things that Clifford brought home from one of his trips. We would sit at the dinner table, and then we would have discussions as a family. And then I'd say, oh, did you know that Uncle Clifford's in China? Then, about another month later, I'd say, did you know that Uncle Clifford's in Japan? Oh, do you know that Uncle Clifford's in New Mexico? He went on a hiking trip. Every place he went, he would send a postcard. And one trip, he brought this little ball back. And I thought I'd bring this little ball tonight. And Clifford, this ball sits on our exercise machine. But I think it's also a symbol of you, even though it was a gift to the kids. We can squeeze it, and it's soft. But if you take it and you throw it and you need to be tough, you can be tough. It's filled with lots of colors, and it's vibrant, just like Clifford. And if you look really, really closely, some of those threads have little strings intertwined. And that, to me, symbolizes all the mixing that Clifford has done, because he is probably one of the most diverse people that I've ever seen. He associates with people regardless of race, regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of what their likes or dislikes are. And then, if you really look closely, you'll see a little bit of glitter. And I think this glitter is for all of us to say, let our lives glitter with knowledge. And then when you look at the shape, he reminds us that we must be a well-rounded person. Clifford, thank you so much for everything you've given all of us.
Yeah. Maybe I should have gone first. It is a pleasure to be here on behalf of my longtime friend Clifford, and it's amazing that as I look out and see all of the people that we've known over the years, it truly is a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor as well. All week I've been trying to figure out exactly when we met, and as best as I can tell, we were probably sophomores in high school. And this is true, although he went to Benson and I went to Jeff, but we were friends through a social club that we formed, and I guess ever since that time we have been friends. So if you know how old we are, you'll know that that's approximately 46 or 7 years we've known each other and been friends. But although you can be friends with someone, you never really know what they're about until you live with them. And when we were sophomores at Oregon, we lived together. And I always felt that, you know, Clifford was a very trustworthy person, honorable person, and a very dependable person. And at his investiture, I told a number of stories about our association together at the University of Oregon. And one of the stories I told I was not going to repeat, and I apologize if anyone has heard this, but one of my former law clerks came to me tonight and said, "You must tell that story." And you know that all federal judges do what their law clerks tell them to do. So I will repeat this. But basically, when I was playing on the football team, the one thing I didn't like to do, although I could do, was cook. And so I convinced Clifford that I did not know how to cook. So every night, the dependable Clifford, I'd come home and I'd have a dinner just sitting there on the table. It was all, oh, it's great. He's a great cook. And this went on for like 6 or 7 or 8 months, and then we went home Thanksgiving, and Clifford came over for Thanksgiving dinner, and afterwards he was telling my mom what a great meal it was and how fortunate I was to have a mother that was willing to fix meals like that. And she turned to him and said, "I didn't cook, Answer cooked." So that sort of ended that evening plate. But it is true. Clifford is a very dependable, honest. He takes the high road no matter what the issue is. If you need something from Clifford and he says he'll do it, then you know it'll be done. And I think when you look out and see all of his friends that are here, everyone would say that very thing, that Clifford always takes the high road. He's a very ethical person. He's a person that has always had friends and enjoyed being around people that he called his friends. And I think that in and of itself says what a person's like. When you have friends that you can cherish over numerous years and they come out for events like this, I think that really says what the person's about. And like Julie, I would like to say to Clifford, thank you for having been yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Answer and Julie. Joyce Benjamin and I were in the same class in law school, graduating in 1974. There, the similarities end, as she's had a real career One that's included practicing with the firm of Johnson, Harang, Swanson and Long in Eugene, helping to found her own firm, Benjamin, Waggoner, Chapman and Farley in 1981, and serving as an executive in the Oregon Department of Education until her retirement in 2002. Joyce got to know Judge Freeman in law school and worked with him on the Board of Education. Joyce, will you come up and share some experiences?
That's a very hard act to follow. I had asked Richard if I could go first because I thought I could talk about Cliff and the Board of Education because I think that essentially defines Clifford is his ability as an educator. And that I think has made him a great lawyer and certainly a great public servant. So I began by saying we're going to be here to honor Cliff as an outstanding lawyer and a fine judge who's committed his life to public service. And Mike Schrunk and Ansel Haggerty are going to talk about those parts of Clifford's life, and I'm going to talk about Cliff as a teacher and an educator. His long-standing interest in education is really essential to understanding what makes him tick, what Clifford is about. And I think without that drive for education, he would be a totally different person, and he certainly would not be receiving this reward. His first career, as Jewel mentioned, was not in law but in education. He received a degree in economics, and then he went to the Northwest Lab shortly thereafter. That's where I first got to know him. The Northwest Lab is an interesting entity. There are 10 of them around the country, regional laboratories, and what they are is, I would call a CEE. They're continuing education for educators, and they sort of get public school teachers and public school board members and private school teachers, like Catholic parochial school people come to these lab meetings too. Community college people and college professors work together to try and improve how we teach children. They do research, but they also do an awful lot of training. And one of the things Clifford did was train people. During that process, he got a certification as a teacher because the state of Washington wanted him to be certified. Am I coming through to the people in the reach is good? There is always that echo chamber effect that I could do if I sort of palm this mic for a while, but I won't try that. Anyway, I first met Clifford when he was providing an educational training for board members somehow, and I was on the local Board of Education down in Lane County. So we became friends then. I admired him, and then I was very pleased to meet him later when he became a lawyer, or on his way to becoming a lawyer. I was in the glorious class of '74, as Richard mentioned, along with Senator Wyden, I suppose, who I'm sorry is not here tonight to play tribute to Cliff. Anyway, we were all in law school together, and I renewed my friendship with Cliff and admired him and enjoyed him very much. I was impressed at that time with his interest in understanding the problem at hand. And he could get to the problem, and then he could think about solutions and issues. And those traits, surely, that he demonstrated at the lab, and I think he demonstrated in law school, have helped Cliff in his later career. Cliff graduated in '76, and he went into general practice and then to the Metropolitan Public Defender's Office. In the meantime, I graduated and been appointed to the State Board of Education. It's like one of those threads that Julie talked about in her wonderful ball. I was sort of a piece of Clifford's life, intermittently, in and out, in and out, in and out. And so Cliff came on the State Board of Education a few years after I did, and every board member was struck by Cliff's ability to look at a problem, to try to discuss it, to try to ask the right questions of the superintendent, ask the right questions of fellow board members, and surely ask questions of the staff and the people who appeared before us. We admired Cliff, the whole board admired Cliff, liked Cliff. We became very close friends. There were only 7 members, and you either love everybody or you hate everybody in that kind of situation. And we were a bunch of lovers, I guess, rather than a bunch of haters. And we decided that Cliff would make a great national president of the National Association of State Boards of Education, which is a small but fairly important Washington, D.C. public interest group. So we started Cliff on the tracks through the chairs at NASB, and in due course he became president of NASB. We were very pleased and very proud. Cliff went on not only to spend 11 years on the State Board of Education, several times as president. He served as the president of NASB, was on the board for many years, and he went on to be one of the first members of the National Board of Professional Teachers Standards. In his service as NASB, he had helped establish, with other Washington organizations, this board to bring some certification and education to public school teachers so that teachers could go out and board members in hiring them, administrators in hiring them would have a feeling if these were quality people who really understood how to teach children. While Cliff was on the State Board of Education, when I talked to fellow board members, people talked about Clifford's ability to reach out to other people, and I think that is really true. Cliff was one of the board members who insisted that we had to meet out of Salem, that we had to go talk to the teachers in Coos Bay and the ranchers in Klamath Falls and the public members and public school pupils over in Baker City. And so we campaigned around the state. We would go off perhaps 3 times or 4 times a year to meet in some other venue so that we could talk to people and people could talk to us and see that the decisions we were making that affected them. They didn't really know who the State Board of Education was, and my guess is, unless you were in public education, you don't have a clue about who the State Board of Education is, even if you're in this room. But we do have a significant and important role in setting standards for education and selecting textbooks. And you will be pleased to know that we have not followed the Kansas example in selecting textbooks, partly because we had Clifford Freeman. We have impeccable science standards, and Cliff was part of helping form those standards. When Cliff became a judge, he maintained his interest in learning, and he continued to apply his skills as an educator. While he was a judge, I know he has supported classroom law projects, and the Classroom Law Project, and that's something that brings, where lawyers and judges bring civics, education about civics and the Bill of Rights and constitutional law to students in elementary school, middle school, and high school. It's a great way of having an experiential learning experience for children, and Cliff was instrumental in that project. He's also been instrumental in working to see that offenders, often who've had just terrible educations, have an opportunity, a second chance at education. And that's part of what the American system is about. We're a second chance system. Even elderly people like 40-year-old Joyce Benjamin get a second chance at education and become lawyers. Anyway, Cliff has worked with the Offenders Program run by the London Center, and he has also worked with many other educational organizations. I think Cliff's lifelong devotion to education has colored and enriched his approach to law. I believe that Cliff has the attributes of many of our favorite teachers. You all remember that gray-haired lady who was strict, but who really understood U.S. history or mathematics or chemistry, or that perfectly marvelous gent who, in addition to being a coach, was an educator. These guys were strict but fair, and that's really Cliff. And I was struck as I looked through Cliff's record, I discovered something that was fun. It was an observer of the West Side Community Court who noted that Cliff is stern but very compassionate judge who has substantial but meaningful interactions with those who appear before them. So I think in honoring Cliff as a lawyer, the University of Oregon is also honoring a great educator.
We all know Mike Schrunk, graduate of the law school's class of 1967. He's been Multnomah County's district attorney since 1981, almost a quarter of a century. And where most elected DAs seem to spend every working hour burnishing their tough-on-crime credentials and grandstanding at hastily called press conferences, Mike earns his stripes by using the trappings of office to be a good citizen. Do not, however, let his warm and fuzzy exterior give you any misapprehension about the activities of his office. I had occasion this week to be called for jury duty, and I can tell you that at least 2 of Multnomah County's deputy district attorneys, both of them women, are about as tough on crime as they come. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Schrunk.
Not a bad introduction for a fellow who made me the rogue of the week one time. Well, President Frohnmayer, honored guests, judges, and Clifford, it's delightful to be here, and I commend the choice of the award to you, Judge Freeman. I'm here to tell you a little bit about Clifford and how the public defender and I went out to recruit a community court judge. We've been trying to get quality of life crimes tried out in the neighborhood, in the neighborhoods in North, Northeast, and Southeast, and try to set up community courts. And the public defender and I really did a job on the presiding judge. And we worked him, and he said, all right, I give up. If you can find a judge that's willing to go out there, and I don't want you two quarreling about that judge. So Jim and I, a lot of you know Jim Hennings, we sat down and we thought, who would be a good candidate? Who is someone we could approach? Who is someone that would interface with the community, that the community would like, that would be sufficiently stern, yet friendly enough to get along? So we approached Clifford, and we went up and made an appointment and said, hey, we got to talk to you. And he worked for Jim, and he tried cases against the men and women in my office, and he had a good reputation, integrity, took care of business, very thoughtful, and we thought this would be good. And he said, but we'd like to have you come to a community meeting. Now, our first court, our site was already preordained. We were going to do it at the King Center. We'd remodeled a community room, or we were in the process of remodeling a community room. And so Jim and I started on the selling job to Clifford. We said, Cliff, the community feels neglected. They feel that the rule of law is not being followed. There's got to be a consequence. There's got to be a fair, even-handed, there's a consequence out in the community, and you're the person. Would you at least come to a community meeting? So we had this committee, and we had citizens, and we'd been meeting, and they'd been deciding what they wanted, and they said, well, you're going to bring a real judge out here? So, well, he's going to show up. Now, Clifford, you got to know Clifford, he came to the first meeting, and he sat there, listened. And if any of you have been in meetings with him, he's very thoughtful, and he put his glasses on, and he looked, and there were community activists. They're saying, we do this and that, and will you let us sentence? No, won't do that, won't do that. But he signed up, and he was the first community court judge we had. Now, something you ought to know, he's the second one in the country. And in fact, I brought a book tonight, and I commend it to you, Good Courts, The Case for Problem-Solving Justice, published by the Center for Court Innovation. Now, what reminded me, this was sent to me a couple months ago by the people back in New York at the institution, and today, or yesterday, the ABA Criminal Justice Section did a very good book review on it, and they featured Clifford in it. Now, it's kind of interesting. If you look at, they talk about quoting him, in the afternoon and evening when children are on their way to the store, friend's house, and after-school activities, the men rolling by saying, he would take the time to talk to offenders about what's wrong with prostitution in the community. He would take time to get in their face, and he would ask them what's going on. He stuck his neck out for a whole lot of people in the community. He deserves kudos for that. It could have been fallen flat. He risked his reputation by going out. He sat in the courtroom. Now, the courtroom is something else. Now, this is not without controversy, because the Citizen Committee wanted an elevated platform for the judge. Now, remember that debate, Judge? And Clifford said, just give me a chair and a desk. They said, no, our judge is going to be elevated. So, risers we had in there for Clifford. Substance over form. He brought substance to that court. Time after time after time. He took time to talk to the offenders, tell them what you were causing the trouble in the community. He worked with them. He also brought into it a new dimension to the community court for us, and that was a social service program they find out that the offenders in this court are very needful, and that's probably part of his education, part of his humanity, that we cobbled together a group of social service providers. And frequently a sentence would be to seek mental health, to seek health counseling, to seek job. Sometimes they would have to write essays. Sometimes they would have to report. They would go out in the community and do countless hours of community service. And behold, you know, if they successfully did it, there would be a dismissal at the end of the path. If they didn't, they would face the judge. Now, he's remembered, and I can't do this right, but if you ask the deputy district attorneys and the deputy public defenders and the work crew people that staffed it, those who didn't comply got the Clifford stare. Now, Clifford, now I can't do this right, but maybe you can get him after he's had a glass of wine. His chin goes down just about to his chest. His glasses tip, and he gives that look, that ferocious look, that quieted the courtroom, that stopped everybody. It was known as the judge's stare. And a lot of this is special judging. A lot of it is theater for the other offenders in the courtroom. But it works. We had marked improvement in the community. We started a second one, and we started a community group out in southeast Portland. Now, they came to visit. Now, what did they want? They wanted Clifford to be the southeast. The Brentwood-Darlington court that we started. And so it mushroomed. So, Clifford, you are truly, you know, I hate to use the word here, but a trailblazer on the judiciary. You know, it's, and Clifford, one that we've never had on probation. But, you know, I commend to all of you the book. You can read about Clifford's successes and about the New York successes too. But Clifford truly made a difference during his time in blazing the trail in the community court. And he left a mark for the fellow judges, and I see some of you sitting around here that are going to follow Clifford back into the community and the community courts when we get the funding from the legislature to do that. Now, remember that. Clifford, thank you.
Mike, thank you very much. I want to remind you, we are continuing to publish our newspaper. Now, for many years, a number of us have been urging Margie Parris to apply to be Dean of the Law School. And for those of you who don't know, it's a real pleasure to introduce her tonight because for the next 2 years at least, she is the full-fledged Dean of the Law School. Margie?
Thanks. Thank you. So this is the first group I've addressed as the Dean, and thank you. And it's a real honor for me, especially to address this group at the Frohnmayer Award dinner that honors the Frohnmayer family. We thank you so much. I'm especially pleased to represent the law school community here tonight, the faculty, many of whom are here, our staff who are here as well. For us, this is such an unbelievably wonderful opportunity to see you again. You know, it's very odd being an educator. Those of you who are educators know this, that you work year after year, you fall in love with people, you feel that you've touched them and they've touched you, and then they go out and we remain. It's bittersweet for us. This time of year is particularly bittersweet as we get towards graduation. We're going to lose another group of you, another 180 of you, but at the same time we feel wonderful as you go out and do the good work that you do and take some of us with you, a little bit of us with you. So it's a particular honor for me today to thank the Honorable Clifford Freeman for all the good work that you've done in the community, representing in part our law school and the faculty and staff who love it so much. Thank you, Judge Freeman. Well, my real job tonight is to introduce our next speaker who will present the award, our wonderful president, Dave Frohnmayer, who represents to us the epitome of integrity, intelligence, service, and dedication. President Frohnmayer.
Thank you, Dean Paris. Really, what a wonderful occasion to see so many of you here and in such a celebratory mood, and so obviously enjoying the company of each other on an occasion that is so very special for this School of Law. Celebrating public service. Permit me just one personal note. My father, Otto, whom I think you know was actually an immigrant from Germany, came to Portland with his family at the age of 6 months, was actually a bellhop in this hotel between high school and college. So that's where he earned his first money to go to the University of Oregon. And so this newly renamed Embassy Suites really has a very long family heritage. And that means a lot. On a more immediate note, I have very little sympathy for my very good friend Mike Schrunk. I have been named Rogue of the Week twice in the last last 5 years. I did not know I was even competing for that honor. And since Mr. Meeker has gotten a Pulitzer Prize, he's been unstoppable. So God knows what next faces us. You have before you in your programs the citation for Judge Freeman. He is truly extraordinary. I'm honored to say that we shared a class together when I was a very baby professor, and he was part of that enormously influential and powerful and wonderful class in the early 1970s. So you know that this is a person for whom public service is simply a mantra. And the character of his public service has been unstinting, it has been ceaseless, it has been exemplary, and it covers an enormous number of fields of endeavor. And it's always been something that's part of his character. So it is with great pleasure tonight that we salute his public service. You are anxious to hear from him, as I. He doesn't just do what he has to do. He does what's most important. He does what needs doing. So the Honorable Clifford Freeman, would you come forward, please, and receive the accolades of your friends and supporters for this truly wonderful acknowledgement.
Thank you very much. I'm humbled, but I'm resurrected by the honor. Since this is about community service, I'd like to go back to the beginnings. My mother, Odessa Freeman, was very active in PTA. I used to go to meetings with her. Be in the auditorium, I didn't know about much was going on, but I knew it was a PTA meeting, and there was teachers and parents working together to make the schools better. And later, I was thinking about education, but I got to tell you, I was a little ambivalent about it. And between my junior and senior year, this minute, okay, thank you. Between my junior and senior year in high school, my uncle, Charles Lewis, from Seattle, came down. He said, "What are you going to do next year when you finish school?" I said, "Well, Uncle Charlie, I'm going to get a job and buy a car." And if you think if you think I had a look. Uncle Charlie said, "No, you're not." He said, "You're going to get these applications out and study these schools. You're going to go to college." He said, "You can always buy a car." He said, "Any fool can go buy a car." I said, "But in education, the thing can't be repossessed, can't be stolen. And you got it, you got it. And you're going to get it." So, started at the University of Oregon, and Answer, he's a little modest. We were both seniors. He was at Jeff Isaac Benson. Around that time, there was a scholarship opportunity for two, quote, minority students who had good grades. At that time, Answer and I both had B averages. And the scholarship was you get, I think, about $1,000, and you'd also get a job. And so I went and he went. Now, he was clever and skilled enough to parlay his entry to campus to a football scholarship, which had a lot more perks to it, but and travel and pom-poms and all that, but and I just toiled in the vineyards, and finally I found out there was a sport I could play. It was rugby. But went to UVO, and then the last year, 65, 66, UVO got what's called an Upward Bound program. This is a program to educate kids who their teachers said, this person can do the work, they just need an opportunity. And if we can get them opportunity and get them a few skills, they can go do things. And it was started by a gentleman named Kev Collins, who had recently passed away. He was a reporting guy. He always worked with kids. He liked them. And then a little later, this gentleman right here, Art Pearl, came to run the program. Now, Art, I'd never seen anybody like Art before. I never met anybody like Art before in terms of being a professor, being outspoken, and knowing his oats, so to speak. I mean, you know, he might be a little animated about some things. You go look what he's talking about, he's got the goods. And I went to work for the Upward Bound program that summer as a counselor, and I got more interested in education. And then later, right out of undergraduate school, I went to law school. And how many of you remember Paper Chase? That's how it was in 1966. But to be honest, I can't blame the law school. It was me. We had some great laughs and fun and games there, and we also had Dean Orlando John Hollis, who had his own sense of humor. But I wasn't concentrating on law school, and I'd like to blame the school, but I can't. So at the end of the year, they sent me a letter and said, "We think it'd be in your best interest to pursue another career." And I did. I went to work for the phone company for a year as a marketing person. Then I went to work for Northwest Regional Education Laboratory. And I got involved with them because when I was with the phone company, as a citizen, citizen volunteer, I got involved with the neighborhood Model Cities program to prepare an education plan. As a matter of fact, I was co-chair of the education committee. And during that course of time, a good friend of mine named Pat Rumer, I don't think Pat's here tonight, but Pat was working for the lab, and she was going back east to go to graduate school, so she left. I applied for her job. I got her job. I left the phone company. And while at the lab, I was there for about 5 years. We did a lot of different things, did some research work, and we do workshops, as Joyce mentioned. We worked in Idaho, Montana, Alaska, Wyoming, Washington. We had a lot of frequent flyer miles. But near the end of that term, I thought, you know, I'm doing all this work. It's pretty high-level work. I should try and document it, or certify it, if you will, by enrolling in graduate school. So at that time, Art Pearl was doing a program in Portland as well as Eugene. I contacted Art and I went to study with him and got my master's degree. And at that time, had a visit with Art. I said, Art, you know, I went to law school and they kicked my hind end. But I still like the law. I said, but I'm still real interested in education. What do you think I should do? And he said, well, he says, if you go to get a doctorate, you can be a professor or teacher. You can, you know, do this or that, maybe be a superintendent. But he says, if you get a law degree, there's a little more play there. You know, you could still be a professor. You could be on a school board, or you could practice law, you know, specialize in education law. And that influenced me to go to law school. And at that time, how many people remember Herbert W. Titus? Okay. Anybody care to share a memory? Well, Herb was one of my, let's see. Yeah, I think Herb was one of my professors the first year. And he was not paper chase guy. He was very gregarious, outspoken, and I remember he was talking about taking a different points of view on things once, and he gave an example of some current play that was on Broadway. It was about Shakespeare, and he said, to be or not to be, what the heck? And so he was kind of outside the box. But I did contact him, and I told him, I said, Dr. Titus, Professor Titus, I'm interested in getting back in law school. You got any suggestions? And he says, yeah, I do. He says, what you need to do, he says, you need to document what you've been doing since you've been out of school, document your achievements, and send in your plea. And so I did, and Dean Scholes was dean then. And they let me back in, but it was one of those, there's no net, there's no probation. If your feet miss the limb of your head, it's the ground. But I was up for it, and got through everything. And then I got the prophecy of Art Pearl caught up with me. I became a member of the bar, I think 77. Bob Straub was the lame duck governor, 78, late 78. There's a young man worked for him named Phil McLaurin, who I knew from Portland. And Phil called me and said, Ellis Gasson's going to California. Are you interested in being on the Board of Education? I said, what, Board of Education? He said, yeah. I said, you got experience in education. You can do it. I said, it'd be a good experience for you. So I said, sure. So I got appointed. And then I didn't think it would last because I'm a Democrat and Vic T is not. And I know how things can go sometime. But actually, Governor Tia was, he's one of the best people I ever worked with in terms of executive of, state executive or executive of any huge outfit. He was a square shooter. He reappointed me twice. That was holder appointment for Governor Goldschmidt. So that's where I got involved in most of my community service. And then I guess there's a time when somebody said, you know, you got to be careful about getting involved in this and that. He says, because then they said, you know, it's kind of like, oh yeah, let Mikey eat it, you know. Everybody's after you to have you to do something. And sometimes there's no end, and sometimes you do have to say no. But I will say that it's been a reward for me to do the things that I've done, and certainly to be recognized here tonight, because I think it's important for all of us who have skills, particularly legal skills, to give something back. I remember the first, I was going to work at a legal aid clinic in Portland after my first year in law school, but because I wasn't going back to law school the next year, I couldn't do that. But Phil Lothian was head of that clinic, and he's a real straight shooter. I don't know how many of you know Phil, but he's a real straight shooter. And he said, you know, look, to deal with law practice, he says, legal knowledge is a tool. If you go into it thinking, well, I got to get compensated for everything, and I do, he says, it's not going to work. He says, you go into it saying, I want to help somebody, I want to do some good. If I make anything on it, fine. If I don't, fine. But this tool is something that belongs to all the people, and that's how you've got to approach it. And then later I worked with Tony Pizzuti. It was my first job at law school. I don't know if Tony and Charmaine made it tonight, but Tony, so one office practice, Canby, Oregon, like Main Street practice, if you will. Go down to practice, street, you see the butcher, the baker. I'm serious, I don't see any candlestick makers, but these were, you know, real folks. And we had another office in Portland. But Tony's deal was, I said, Tony, I said, look, I said, I'm a little concerned about my beard. And he said, why? And I said, well, you know, it's not too long about this black power thing, you know, and some people might be uncomfortable with black people with beards. He said, I'm not uncomfortable with it. He says, don't worry about it. He says, tell you the truth, he says, nobody out here is going to not come in here because you don't have a beard either. Because you do have a beard, so. But he said, you know, people come in, talk to them, do what you can if you can help them. If you can't help them, point them to somebody else. Don't charge them any money. He said you want to get it where people are not shy about getting legal advice, because we all know what the usual consequences are of late legal advice. But Phil, Tony, doing what you can for people, and I work with Jim Hennings at the Public Defender. I don't know if Jim made it tonight, but he is personally committed to criminal defense. I mean, 1,000%. And he stood behind us, said, you know, we got to defend our people. We got to make the Constitution do what it's supposed to do for them. And working there, he said, well, you know, you're involved in this education thing. He says, you get many vacation days than anybody else. He says, so work it out. And that worked good for me. But anyway, I want to thank all of you for coming. I can't tell you how moved I was when I first spoke with Ellen Rosenblum, and she told me I had been selected for this award. I said, what? Same kind of award that Dave Frohnmayer got, Ashenbrenner. Let's see here. Hardy Myers, and I'm missing somebody, help me out. Ted Goodwin. I said, those guys are giants. And I said, well, we think you've done a few things too. So, again, I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I hope that you find a place in your personal and professional lives to give something back. Point somebody in the right direction if you can't help them yourself. And whether it's something big or something little, you know, working with kids or serving on a board, I can tell you, sometimes those board meetings get awful. But it's like Woody Allen said, 90% of genius is showing up. So show up and do your best. And thank you again.